I'm Maggie and welcome to our winter kitchen. It is now March, and although spring should be just around the corner, it is still probably 3 months until we have anything growing outdoors in our garden here in New Brunswick, Canada. So we are still eating from the food that we had stored last harvest season. And since it's the end of winter, our stores are getting pretty low, but I thought I'd show you how we're able to eat seasonally even without a root cellar. So I've done a few videos in the past on how we store our crops for winter without a root cellar, and I'll link to those. But basically what we do is we find a room or space that isn't heated, but all the rooms around it are heated, so it keeps it between 0 degrees Celsius, so not freezing, and about 10 degrees Celsius. Since we're here in Canada, outside it's really cold, and so that's how we're able to keep that room at that right temperature. Although a root cellar would be ideal, and I'd love to have one someday, that's what we're currently doing. So I thought I'd tell you about what we have stored and how they're doing, and then how we're using them to eat this winter. So one vegetable that we stored this year were squash, and we stored sweet mama squash, and I just pulled these out of our cold room, not really cold room, but a room that's cold, and because they're starting to go bad a little bit, we've been eating them throughout the winter, but now I'm going to process all these and then freeze them so that we can preserve what is left, and I'll cut off the little bits that are bad and then use the parts that are good. Something else that we stored a lot of this year were potatoes. I think we stored around 200 pounds of potatoes. And we also tried a new way of storing them this year. We used these old milk crates, and we had quite a few of these filled. Right now they're starting to sprout a little bit, and in the past, in previous videos, I've showed you how we stored these in sand, and it worked really good. However, it was kind of really heavy and also dirty, so every time you'd get sand everywhere and it was a mess. And so it worked good, but it was kind of irritating. So we thought we'd try something new this year and just putting them in these bins, and it's worked super good. The ones that are actually in the room are nice and hard and firm. They're all Yukon Gold potatoes, and we have a lot left to eat through, but won't be harvesting potatoes until fall, so there should be enough to get us through until fall for me and my husband. Another vegetable we have stored, it's not that pretty, but we store them like this. They are carrots. So we have them stored in sawdust this year. It's very similar to the videos I've done about storing them in sand, except for it's a lot lighter, the bucket, so that's why I like it. I gotta dig down deep because this bucket, I've eaten through most of them. But, here is a carrot. So I've done this method for the carrots for a couple years now, and they always get a little bit bendy, but really this one's pretty, like, you can hear a snap to it still. I'll leave this one now. But this one is still nice and firm, not much softer than pulling it out of the ground really. And they have a great taste to them, and it's quite an easy way of storing them in the sawdust. And the last vegetable we still have in storage over in our cold room are cabbage, and as you can see, this one, it looks not that great on the outside. However, on the inside, when you peel back the layers, it looks good underneath. So there's a few layers that look bad, but then you peel them back and you have a cabbage that looks nice and fresh, just like at the grocery store, since this is what they do when they sell you cabbage, because cabbage don't grow in the winter here. So these are really great. We have almost probably 10 left, and for 2 people, a big cabbage like this lasts us quite a while. So that's great to have these. It's important when you have food in cold storage to remember, check on your vegetables. So I need to process these squash because I checked on them and they're not looking so good. Just so you're aware, we didn't actually grow all this food. We grew a lot of food last year in our garden, but we ended up buying quite a bit of it from a local farmer. So although it's not our own, it's so much cheaper to buy them in the harvest season and store them myself. Also, it supports the farmers, and I know where my food has come from, and so I really like this method. Another way that we store food for winter without a root cellar is not just root cellar vegetables, but also through canning and preserving. So I thought I'd show you my pantry. So this is our pantry, and it's what's left of our canned food for this season. We've eaten through a lot of it this year, and since it is almost growing season, I am looking forward to filling this back up. So on this shelf we have our maple syrup, and we make this in the spring, so we have a lot of it for 2 people to eat through. We usually give it away as gifts, and we give some to our family, and we eat it quite often, and I've been baking with it a lot. So actually later on I'm going to share with you guys one of my recipes that is my favorite for using for maple syrup, one of my favorite cookie recipes. But I can turn this into maple butter and maple sugar, which I probably will do with a lot of this, to keep using it a different way when we get more of our fresh syrup in for this year. So up above it we have our fiddleheads. We have quite a few. So our fiddleheads, we get them in the springtime and we harvest them along the banks of the river, and they're just stored the way my great grandmother used to store them. They're just pretty much in salt water. And so I can these up in the springtime, and we need to eat a lot more. And I'm going to be doing a recipe later on with these as well. And also they don't take any effort to grow since they're forage, which is so nice. On this shelf we have some more fiddleheads, but these are pickled fiddleheads. And then here we have some canned stew. So this is pork stew. We have the main meat that we're currently eating is pork, since we raised a pig this year and butchered it. And now some of it is in these stew cans. So it's really nice having canned stew. It makes for a quick lunch, and it's also just a great way to preserve our root crops that might go bad in a little while. They'll keep really long in this way since they've been pressure canned. Next we have just a couple pickled beets. We have a couple cans left. We have a few pickles left, like bread and butter pickles. We went through all of our dill and bread and butter pickles this year, so we need to make definitely more next year of those. Next I have a garden relish, and I have a video on how to make that, and I can link that below. Garden relish is one of my favorites. It's so good on hamburgers, but also I really like it in deviled ham sandwiches and things like that. But I have a few more of these left. And then next beside it we have all of our jams. Our jams are getting kind of low. I made so much the year before. I did not make any this year, but I definitely will need to make some this next strawberry season. So we're getting kind of low on that, but it's so good. This one's actually a strawberry rhubarb jam. And then over in the corner we have some stewed rhubarb. This is a few cans left. I'll probably make a pie with these. I loved having just canned fruit because I can make it into an easy, quick pie, and it's just nice for the winter season. Down on the shelf below it we have all of our mustard pickles. So these are really good. We use them a lot. We love them on potatoes and lots of things, and we go through a lot. I've made a lot, so we have lots left, which is really nice. So I'll probably make a smaller batch next year. We have a few pickled beans left, and then this is what's left of our tomato sauce. We have gone through a lot of tomato sauce. All of our canned tomatoes are gone. I use them a lot in chilies and soups, and we just really like them. So next year I'd like to make even more of those, so we're hopefully going to grow a lot of tomatoes this year. Then down on the bottom shelf here, we have our last shelf of pretty much just salsa. We have a ton of salsa left, so we use this sometimes just like regularly with nacho chips and things, but we don't actually buy nacho chips very often, and I have not learned to make those yet. And so most of the time I use this with eggs and omelets and things, because it has tomatoes and peppers and onions like you would usually put in an omelet, but it's already all done for you. So I put these with eggs a lot, and just sometimes in soups that call for tomato sauce, since I'm getting low on actual tomato sauce. Any recipe that calls for tomato sauce, I often can just use this instead, and it just has a few extra things in it. And then the last thing I have over here is just a couple jars of yellow beans canned up. We're pretty low on these. These are a couple years old. I don't really like beans in general, but my husband really does, and so it's a good lesson on make the things that you actually like to eat. And so I'll probably make a few of these next year again, but not a whole lot, since we don't actually eat that many of them in a year. So that is all what's left in our pantry, and I thought I'd show you a few recipes on what we're going to do with them. The first recipe we're going to do are maple shortbread cookies, and this uses maple syrup that has been turned into maple sugar and maple cream. I made this maple cream last spring during maple sugar season, and it has lasted for a full year for me in the fridge. These cookies are a Canadian classic, and this homemade version is so good. To start with, cream 1 cup of butter until it is fluffy, and then we're going to add half a cup of maple sugar. If you don't have any maple sugar, you could use a brown sugar for this. Add the sugar and beat it for 3 minutes. Once creamed, we're going to add 2 cups of flour to the mixture and 1 teaspoon of salt. Once the doughs come together, it should still be pretty dry. You know the dough's ready when you can give it a squeeze and it holds its shape. Next, turn it out onto your countertop and pat it down, and then roll it out until it is about 1/4 inch thick or less. Next, we're going to cut out the cookies, and I use a cookie cutter that's shaped like a maple leaf, so it's similar to the store-bought versions, but you can use any shaped cookie cutter that you have. Transfer the cookies onto a greased baking sheet and bake in the oven at 325 degrees until they start to go slightly golden brown around the edges. Once cooled, spread maple cream onto the cookies and sandwich them together. I like a lot of maple cream. I think the taste is so good. You could also serve these without, but it's definitely best when you make them into a yummy maple sandwich cookie. The next recipe I want to share with you is a quick quiche, and this is going to be a fiddlehead and bacon quiche. I love making quiches because they're really quite quick to put together if you already have your pie crust made. I usually keep a few pie crusts on hand in the freezer, and so when I want to make a quiche, I just pull one out. So for this recipe, for 6 pie crusts, we're going to have 6 cups of flour sifted into a bowl. To that, we'll add 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 2 cups or 1 pint of lard. I make my pie crust 6 at a time. That way it works out to use a full pint jar of lard. I use home rendered lard that we did last year from our pigs, and just makes the pies taste so good. I love being able to cook from food that we produce on our homestead. And I'll add 3 tablespoons of butter. Then I use a pastry blender to blend them together until it is the texture of peas or coarse sand. After blended, I'm going to be adding approximately 1 1/3 cup of cold water. So I make a well in the center of my flour and add the water slowly. Sometimes you don't need quite all the water, sometimes you need a little bit more, and so I just gently mix. You do not want to overmix your pie crust or overwork them. That will make your pie crust tough. Once that's incorporated, I turn it out onto my countertop and pat it into a rectangle, and then divide it into 6 equal parts. Next, I'm going to wrap each pie crust individually and put most of them in the freezer and leave one out just in beeswax wrap in the fridge to cool. Once cooled, I'll remove my pie dough from the wrapper, and then I'm going to flour the surface in my rolling pin and roll it out until it's a bit bigger than the size of my pie pan. Once it's rolled out, I'll fold my pie crust in half and then in half again to easily transfer it into my pie plate. Pat the crust down into the plate and then trim off any excess and turn the edge under. Once it's turned under, I like to use my fingers, my knuckles and finger to crimp the edges. For this quiche, I'm going to add 8 eggs because our eggs are currently small this time of year and our chickens aren't laying very big eggs, but if they were large eggs, I would just use 6. And 3/4 cup of milk and some salt and pepper. Next, I'm going to chop up some cooked bacon into the base of the pie crust. This bacon's from the pig that was butchered in the fall, and it is so good. On top of the bacon, I will add half an onion, and then a full pint can of fiddleheads, or you could use whatever vegetable you have on hand. And then 1 cup of shredded cheese. Then I'll pour the egg and milk mixture over top of the quiche, and it will go into a preheated oven at 375 degrees for 35 to 40 minutes, or until the center is completely set. And then once it comes out of the oven, I let it cool for about 5 or 10 minutes before serving it. Tonight we're gonna have this quiche with some home fries made from our homegrown potatoes, and then have our maple cookies for dessert. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed these recipes and seeing what's in our pantry and root cellar for this season. If you are interested in seeing what we grow this coming season, we'd love to have you subscribe and follow along with our channel. Have a great day, and I'll see you on the next one.